Well, hello, Amanda here. And today I want to give you some insight into why I quit drinking, even though I didn't have a problem. And I think many of you will resonate with my story and see a little bit of yourself in my story. And I really love to share this just because when I started my journey in elective sobriety, there weren't a lot of people talking about sobriety in this way. Really, the only permission slip you had to quit drinking was if you had a problem, if you felt that you were, addicted or needed rehab or recovery or 12 steps or whatever. And those are all extremely valid paths. They just did not resonate with me. And so, to be honest, I probably kept drinking a lot longer than I wanted to just because there was no language or there was no roadmap for how I could do it without having to admit that I was an alcoholic or go to AA or whatever the path was at that point, which again, I think are extremely valid and helpful if those paths resonate with you or if those feel necessary. But for me, it didn't. And I didn't want to do something that felt incongruent. So my journey really started back in, let's say 2015, when I had moved to Austin, Texas. I had left the Midwest, which is where I grew up. I left my college town and my first big kid job to kind of serendipitously take this trip to the Midwest or out of the Midwest and into Austin, Texas. And when I got to Austin, I knew that I was ready for a lifestyle change. The place that I had lived back in the Midwest was this really like see and be seen kind of rub elbows type place, cocktail hour, big charity events type social scene. And I always felt like I was obligated to drink if I wanted to fit in. I didn't really feel like there were people out there doing like have living more wellness minded lifestyles. So I felt that I really needed to move somewhere else in order to reset myself. And so I had this vision that Austin would be this hippy dippy place where maybe people smoked a little bit of pot, but for the most part, they were doing yoga and eating kale. And I just thought it was going to be this instant ability for me to transform. Well, if you have ever heard the phrase, wherever you go, there you'll be, that was my life. I popped into Austin and I hadn't quite yet done the work to be the hippie kale eating yoga girl that I had aspired to be. And so what happened was I was automatically literally magnetized right back to the same type of people who I'd been hanging out within the Midwest. I was hanging out with super successful, high achieving young professionals who had a lot of time and money on their hands. And come Friday night at 5 p.m., it was time for happy hour. So we'd do happy hour and then we'd go out and then we wake up on Saturday and go to a boozy brunch. Then we do it all over again, Sunday fun day until the weekend was over. And then I would end the weekend with such an incredible anxiety hangover or hangxiety that Monday and Tuesday going to work was just a drag. I didn't feel that I was myself. I didn't feel that I was living my best life. While everything I was experiencing was certainly exciting, it kind of felt like I was on this hamster wheel and it started to feel really mundane. It was the same thing over and over again. And the problem is, at the time, I had really started to step into my personal development journey. I was reading all of the self help books. I was reading all of the spiritual development books. I had started studying with Marianne Williamson and Gabby Bernstein. And I really, really wanted to have this miraculous version of my life that they were talking about in all of these books. And so I'd enrolled in therapy. I was going to the gym on a regular basis. I was eating well, but none of it felt like it was working. I didn't feel like any of it was sticking. And I kept having this internal nagging that said, Amanda, you deserve a miraculous life, but you cannot have it with alcohol in the picture. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. You cannot have the best of both worlds. And I really just tried to make that voice shut up. I was like, no, maybe you mean just to moderate. And so I tried moderation. And every time I tried, I would make this commitment and I would try, all these tips and tricks in my head to only drink on the weekends, to only drink on special occasions, to only drink wine, to only drink beer, to only drink if I had a full stomach, to only drink if I was drinking a glass of water in between time, to only drink 3 drinks anytime I went out. I mean, I tried all of these tips and tricks to turn myself into a moderate drinker and none of them worked. More often than not, what went from a night where I had the best of intentions of having just a few would turn into a night where I had a few too many. And then the next day, not only did I feel physically lethargic and riddled with anxiety, I just didn't feel like myself. And I felt like a failure on top of that because I couldn't control alcohol, even though I knew in my heart and by taking the assessment and asking my therapist that I was not an alcoholic. And I even went so far to ask my therapist one day, I said, I really feel like I should quit drinking. And bless her heart, she had the best of intentions. But many therapists are not given models for sobriety or for abstinence outside of AA or outside of recovery or outside of addiction. So she went through the assessment points. And because I didn't meet the criteria of someone who was addicted to alcohol, she basically just told me, well, maybe just cut back. And Oh, if any of you have experienced that, I just want to say, I see you and I hear you, and I'm so sorry. And I know that she didn't have any ill intentions or ill will, but it really just dug at my confidence that the person who was supposed to be encouraging me to live this better life told me to just cut back a little bit. So I kind of kept on this path and kept on this path until I could not avoid it any longer. I remember every major hangover I had in the year 2016 because all of them started with the best of intentions, only to have a few. And finally, on New Year's Eve, not New Year's Day, New Year's Eve 2016, I had gone out the night before. Once again, one of those nights where I intended only to have a few and ended up having a few too many. I woke up with such a tremendous hangover that I could not shake. I got up and had to get an Uber back to my car, and the Uber had this gnarly air freshener and it was musty. And of course, this is December, so you can't just roll down the windows. And I felt like I was going to suffocate or vomit in the back of this Uber. And I barely made it into my car. And then I'm just sitting there bracing myself in the parking lot that we'd left my car in while families are jovially going to lunch and brunch. And I'm sitting here wondering if I'm going to hurl in the parking lot. So I cancel my own brunch plans and I go home and I sulk on the couch all day, knowing that I need to pull myself together for our New Year's Eve celebration, where I was only able to barely sip a margarita and a glass of champagne. And then I went home at midnight. And the next day I woke up and we met for brunch. And I had maybe one beer and one mimosa. And I sat my unfinished beer down on the table and I said, "This is it. I am not drinking anymore." I committed on January 1st, 2017 to only doing 30 days. I only wanted to get through dry January because I knew I did not want to keep living the life, keep living on the hamster wheel, that detox retox cycle that I was in with alcohol. And so I put that beer down on the table and I walked out of that bar with the intention of only quitting alcohol for 30 days. But somewhere in that 30 days, what I saw were two things. One, all of my friends were falling off the wagon in rapid succession. By the first weekend, half of my friends who said they were doing dry January too had already dropped off. And I was like, forget that. I am stronger than that. I have more willpower than that. I am not going to give in to this. And so the longer I went, the easier it felt, the more it felt like, wow, I'm really kicking this thing's ass. And I know that's not the experience everyone has. And please know that I also felt plenty of social anxiety, plenty of lack of fitting in, plenty of these emotions that we all get when we stop drinking. But I was so freaking headstrong because every sign around me was pointing to, you can't do this without saying that you're an alcoholic and going to rehab. Every sign was so against me quitting alcohol. Everything around me told me that I needed alcohol to fit in, told me that I needed alcohol for, rubbing elbows at happy hours and things for work. Everything around me told me that I deserved alcohol as an emotional crutch. And I said, bullshit. I'm not going to buy into that narrative. I am a unique individual. I'm stronger than that. So I decided I was just going to keep going. And I committed to 60 more days because I heard that you could change a habit or you could create a new habit in 90 days. Well, the thing that they don't tell you is that that's actually for forming a new habit, right? This was me trying to unwire, rewire an old ancient habit that just, oh, by the way, happened to be one that I was in with a habit forming substance. So at that 90 days, I kind of said, wow, you know what? I'm feeling so good. I'm feeling so great. I'm feeling pretty confident. At that point, I had already conquered my birthday alcohol free, a ton of social events alcohol free. I'd started dating alcohol free. And I really kind of felt like a badass. So I said, I'm going to try and go the full year. And during that full year, I experienced most of the big firsts that you could have in an alcohol free lifestyle: tumultuous holiday with families, vacation, wedding, dates, breakups, all of these things that can be so heavy for us in our society, all of these places where it's kind of the go-to standard just to have a drink to soothe the nerves or to get over the experience or to numb out a little bit. And every time I had one of those experiences, it was just like this magic boost to my confidence. And not only that is I was really doubling down at that time on my personal growth and personal development. So not only was I feeling better, I was actually putting things into my life to make my life start going better. And by the end of that year, I felt so resilient and so sure that my life was going to take a turn for the better that I really could find no reason to go back to drinking. And just to give you some timeline here, so that was 2017. I did the whole year alcohol free. Early in 2018, this was the real kicker. This is where things really changed and where I really knew that I was set on this path for the long term. I had started kind of coaching people. People had started to come to me and ask me questions about how I had stopped drinking, void of any problem, void of going to rehab, and also had managed to keep an active social and dating life. And I started teaching and coaching on this topic, started taking on clients. I started running group coaching programs. But the most miraculous moment came when I was in the shower. And I'm getting choked up a little bit because it was so powerful and it was so strange. And it was the voice of my intuition coming through loud and clear. And I was listening to a podcast in my shower. Mind you, if you don't have a wireless waterproof Bluetooth speaker, you are super missing out. So I'm listening to this podcast and it's an interview with Elena Brower. And if you don't know her, look her up. I hope she will be on the show at some point. But she was actually talking about, she had long quit drinking, but she was talking about giving up weed in the podcast episode. And she said something really profound, but my inner guide took her words and re-scrambled them. And this is what I heard. I heard loud and clear, Amanda, I see you doing big things in this world, but I cannot see you doing them with alcohol in the picture. And you guys, I felt this rush come through my body. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. And I braced myself on the shower wall before getting down and kind of crouching on the shower floor, and tears just started streaming down my face because I didn't know where that message had come from. But I heard it so profoundly and I felt it in every cell of my body. And I knew that it was true. I knew that I was meant to do big things in this world and that alcohol had no place in that path for me. And even though I had always had this cozy dream of being able to go back and moderate and be an every now and again drinker, that voice was so certain that I knew that I could not go back to that path. And it was in that very moment that I decided this is a new way of life for me. Things are going to get so good that alcohol is just going to be a blip on the map in my history. And you know what? I was right. From that moment, things started to change so rapidly and so miraculously that it was never even a question of whether or not I wanted alcohol in my life. Because if my life was that good without alcohol, then I wanted to keep having more of that. And that's what I want for you. So if you have heard a similar whisper, maybe your inner guide doesn't punch you in the gut while you're having a shower. I know that you are here for a reason. Maybe your inner guide message wasn't quite as strong, but I know, as I said in episode 1, that you don't just get these ideas to change your relationship with alcohol at random. I know that you are here for a reason. And I want to remind you and assure you that you don't need to have a problem with alcohol for it to be a problem in your life. And at that point in my life, I was doing everything I could to live the best life. And my life was pretty good, but none of it seemed to really be clicking in the way that I wanted it to. And I know that changing my relationship with alcohol by choosing to have no relationship with alcohol was the catalyst that set me on the path that I am today. And if you don't know much about me, I will tell you that in 2019, sorry, 2019, I was able to quit my corporate job and go full time as a coach. In 2020, I wrote a bang up book proposal with the help of my amazing coach that got the attention of the exact literary agent I wanted. I wanted so deeply to work with Gabrielle Bernstein's literary agent, and I landed a gig with that agent and a wonderful co-agent, Stephen Jan. Shout out to you. And they got me a badass book deal with Avery Publishing, which is a division of Penguin Random House. And I will have my first book out, also called Unbottled Potential, in October 2023. And I will do an entire episode on all the magnetism and all the miracles that have come into my life since I quit drinking. But I can tell you that none of these things would have happened. And if they would have, they wouldn't have happened quite as quickly and as easily as they did if I had not first stopped drinking. And so even though I didn't qualify as an addict, even though I didn't associate as someone who had a problem, I knew that giving up alcohol was going to be so important in my life. And I was right. And I want that for you. I want you to have the level of clarity, the level of confidence, the level of connectedness, the level of magnetism in your life that I have in mine. And I know it is possible for you as well. If you just get in there and do the work, And the thing is, you can't do the work when you're constantly diluting yourself and you're constantly playing small. So if this has landed with you, I invite you to continue listening. I would love if you hit that subscribe button. I would even love more if you rate and review this podcast if this resonated with you and you appreciate this message. And if you take a screenshot and send it over to me on Instagram at Amanda Kuda, I will send you a special little goodie that I am holding for you. I would be so grateful if you just review and share your thoughts on this podcast. And I will catch you here next time.